All right, guys, so I have an absolutely off-the-rails CNN panel here for you guys involving Mehdi Hasan sitting over here, obviously an outspoken critic of Israel, and then over here we have Ryan Girdusky, a conservative. Now, the panel context here is in response to the unhinged Madison Square Garden rally that I covered yesterday on my channel, where you had guys like Tony Hinchcliffe from Kill Tony, who was making racial jokes about Puerto Rico and about black people in the audience, and then you had people up on stage who were saying that Kamala Harris is the Antichrist. You had Tucker Carlson making jokes about the fact that Kamala Harris is biracial, and then you had Trump, of course, talking about how he wants to deport millions of people from the country and how he wants to weaponize the military to go after what he calls the enemy from within. In other words, his political opponents. So, whole bunch of wild shit went down in that rally, and Ryan Girdusky's job here on this panel is to make conservatives seem reasonable, right? To play that off, that's not that big of a deal. You guys are all overreacting. We're not racist. We're not neo-Nazis. That's his job on this panel. Let's go ahead and see how he did.
If you don't want to be called Nazis, stop doing.
You've been called an
anti-Semite
more than anyone else's table.
Yeah.
And people would sit there and no, by me, I never called you an anti-Semite. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying
I'm a supporter of the Palestinians. So I'm used to it.
Yeah, I hope your beeper doesn't go off. The thing is
Did
that
you just say I should die?
You should not.
No,
Did you just say I should be killed?
No, I did not say that. I said, no, I did not say that.
Hold on.
Did your guest just say I should be killed on live TV?
I said I hope
Guys,
you don't.
let me just stop.
You said you hope my beeper doesn't go off.
Because you sound a big supporter
of the Palestinians.
of Hamas.
Guys, let me
I said
stop.
Palestinians.
Are you a supporter
Am I
of
what?
Hamas?
No, of course I'm not.
Palestinians
Then
are
I
Are
apologize.
you a
Ryan.
racist, violent person inciting violence against me?
Ryan.
That's disgusting.
That is completely.
Then I apologize.
Good
That
job,
is
CNN.
completely
Let's have first
out
block
of
say the
pocket.
Muslim guy
You
should
know
be
that.
blown
Then I
up
apologize.
on
Then I
TV.
apologize.
Don't
Then I
say
apologize.
then I
Wow.
apologize. You literally.
say
I
it.
thought he said
accused
Hamas.
him.
I
You didn't think I said Hamas.
Yes,
I
you
said I
did.
supported
Yes, I did.
Palestinian
Yes, I
rights.
did.
Why? Because when you hear
What's funny
Palestinian,
is
you
Rudy
hear Hamas.
Giuliani said this
No,
yesterday,
because-
so you're a great guest to
Listen.
be here
All
to
right,
defend Rudy
I told
Giuliani's
myself
Give me
I
one-
wasn't going to
give me-
entertain
give me one
nonsense
second.
today, and so at this point,
This is what we're in
I
now.
can't
This
do
is America in
Here's
2024.
what I will say.
Forget the
Here's what
racism.
That's right.
It's I should
That's
die.
right.
I didn't say that. You
You
should
said,
die.
what does beeper mean? Don't give me your
I
faint
did not
ignorance.
say you should
Guys,
die.
Why did you say
guys,
with my
give me-
beeper
give me
go
a-
off?
What did you mean?
What did you mean by the beeper?
So what
I
did you
said-
mean?
What did you mean by the beeper?
Hamas.
No, you didn't. You said, I hope your beeper doesn't go off.
Ryan, stop talking.
At least have the guts to support your racist comments.
Hang
I'm
on.
so sorry.
Let her bring it back.
This is why yesterday's rally was disgusting.
Don't call us Nazis, but I'm going to threaten the brown guy as a
This is
terrorist
why.
and kill him.
Because
Okay. Holy shit. All right. So, a couple of things that I wanted to point out here. First off, you can tell that Ryan knew immediately, basically, that he fucked up, right? That's why he's apologizing to Mehdi. Then he apologizes to the host here. I believe her name is Abby Phillips. So he knew immediately that he fucked up and he tried to walk it back. But then his explanation for why he was walking it back, or his justification for why he said, well, I hope your beeper doesn't go off. Obviously, he's referring to the Israeli terrorist attack inside of Lebanon where they detonated, I think it was hundreds of beepers across the entire country, blowing people up in the middle of markets and on buses, etc. in Lebanon. So that's what he was referring to, insinuating that Mehdi Hasan is, somehow a member of Hezbollah and, I hope your beeper doesn't go off. But when he tries to walk it back, his explanation also doesn't make sense because he says, well, I thought you were saying you're a defender of Hamas or something. Okay, first off, obviously Mehdi Hasan is not a fan of Hamas. Okay, he criticizes the government of Israel. He's a defender of Palestinian rights, etc. But he wasn't defending Hamas. He definitely didn't say that. But even if he was, that still wouldn't make sense because, again, the pager attack or the beeper attack was against Hezbollah in Lebanon, right? So it wouldn't even make sense in the bullshit context of him trying to justify what he said. So none of that made sense. He was obviously caught in a difficult moment here. He knew he fucked up. He tried to apologize his way out of it. It didn't exactly work out. Now, again, the deep irony of all of this is that this is supposed to be a panel where you, the conservative in this conversation, Ryan, you're supposed to be making conservatives seem like we're normal people, right? We are not racist. We're not neo-Nazis, right? We're not all this and that. And then you make a racist joke against Mehdi Hasan, insinuating that he is a member of Hezbollah or Hamas because you got confused, right? I mean, he's a perfect guy to have on this panel because he is a perfect representation. That kind of a statement is a perfect representation of what happened at Madison Square Garden, where, as I believe it was this woman here on the panel as well, or maybe it was Mehdi, but one of them pointed out that, yeah, this is kind of the same rhetoric that we heard from somebody like Rudy Giuliani when he got up on stage at the Madison Square Garden rally, where he was saying Palestinians are all murderers. They're taught from the age of 2 years old to kill Americans. Huh? I mean, Ryan, in this situation, textbook, perfect representation of everything that the remaining members of this panel were trying to critique in this segment. Now, here was Ryan's response to this. We'll get to the CNN response to this entire situation here because they actually pulled Ryan off of this panel and then continued the segment and also banned him from being on CNN. But here was Ryan's response to all of this, right? He says, "You can stay on CNN if you falsely call every Republican a Nazi and have taken money from Qatar-funded media." So he's talking about Mehdi Hasan there. "Apparently you can't go on CNN if you make a joke. I'm glad that America gets to see what CNN stands for." Okay. So kind of a classic example here of conservatives saying something and then when they're called out on the thing that they said, when they're recapping it, they try to water it down as much as possible, right? He's making a joke, right? He didn't, on live TV insinuate that Mehdi Hasan is a member of Hezbollah and he has a pager that's going to explode on him, right? He didn't say that. It was just a joke. It was just a lighthearted joke. Okay. I mean, at least stand on business, right? At least own up to what you actually said. I mean, even in the segment, you apologize for it. Why did you apologize for it if you meant what you said and it was just a lighthearted joke? Why did you apologize for it then? And of course, he says, "You can stay on CNN if you falsely call every Republican a Nazi and have taken money from Qatar-funded media." I believe he's talking about Al Jazeera here, where Mehdi Hasan has, done work for in the past. But we'll circle back, I guess, to this, CNN anchors calling certain Republicans, especially Trump, like neo-Nazis or fascists or whatever the case may be, because I do think there is actually some level of hypocrisy here from CNN, given their previous coverage of Israel and Gaza and Palestine. So we'll circle back around to that claim here in a second, but a little bit more here on Ryan Girdusky, right? Because in this segment, Mehdi Hasan was basically making a claim, if you don't want people to call you Nazis, then stop saying things that Nazis would say, right? That was basically what he was saying. A little bit here on Ryan Girdusky. Now, I don't know this guy's life history. I don't know everything he's ever said or written or done on TV or whatever, but this was interesting to me. I saw this floating around. Some people have linked Ryan Girdusky to a far-right national figure, I think it's more accurate to call him a neo-Nazi, Richard Spencer, who has been credited with creating the term alt-right. He was described by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a suit-and-tie version of the white supremacists of old, a kind of professional racist in khakis. Now, Richard Spencer confirmed that at one point, more than a decade ago, Ryan Girdusky wrote for his white nationalist outlet at the time. So, listen, again, I don't know what's in Ryan Girdusky's heart. I don't know if he's a neo-Nazi or if he's just alt-right or if he's a right-winger or whatever the kid, just a Trump supporter. I don't know everything about this guy, but writing for an outlet owned by Richard Spencer is about as much of a red flag as you could possibly imagine. Now, again, we move on here to Abby Phillips' response. So this is after that happened, that chaos that we just witnessed happened. And she comes back on after a little break, and she gives this.
We're back here, and before we get started, I want to just address what happened in the last segment. And first, I want to apologize to Mehdi Hasan for what was said at this table. It was completely unacceptable. When we get this discussion started, you'll see that Ryan is not at the table. There is a line that was crossed there, and it's not acceptable to me. It's not acceptable to us at this network. We want discussion. We want people who disagree with each other to talk to each other. But when you cross the line of a complete lack of civility, that is not going to happen here on this show.
Okay, so he got kicked off mid-segment, basically. They went to an ad break. They came back. He's no longer at the table. Then they also took the additional step of banning him from being on CNN at all, point blank period. So R.I.P. Ryan Girdusky. Now, we also had this statement here that was put out by CNN. Now, this is where I get to a little bit of the hypocrisy here, or the double standards here from CNN. They said, "There is zero room for racism or bigotry at CNN or on our air. We aim to foster thoughtful conversations and debate, including between people who profoundly disagree with each other, in order to explore important issues and promote mutual understanding. But we will not allow guests to be demeaned or for the line of civility to be crossed. Ryan Girdusky will not be welcomed back at our network. Now I get to this, okay? Those of you who have been following my channel over the last couple of months will remember when we covered this story. Rashida Tlaib was unfairly smeared by CNN's Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. So, if you guys remember this story, how it all played out, and go watch my previous video if you want a full rundown, but there were protests that took place inside of Michigan, and Rashida Tlaib, the only Palestinian American representative that we have in Congress who also is a representative from Michigan, she called out the mistreatment of student protesters who are protesting against Israel's genocide and the heavy-handed legal approach that has been taken towards those protesters by the Michigan Attorney General, this woman named Nassar. Now, Nassar, along with Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, then went on to run with the smear campaign, the lie, that Rashida Tlaib's critique of Nassar's treatment of these protesters was purely because Nassar happened to be Jewish. Now, if you go and read the original quote of what Rashida Tlaib was actually saying, nowhere in any way, shape, or form did she say, which is exactly what Jake and Dana were claiming, that the reason Nassar is filing these charges against these pro-Palestine protesters is because Nassar is Jewish. She never said that. She never said anything remotely close to that. In fact, one of the points that she made was that the University of Michigan, where some of these protests were taking place, was trying to behind the scenes pressure Nassar to bring a heavy-handed approach to these protesters. Now, we've gotten further reporting that has actually confirmed Rashida Tlaib's initial thoughts there, that there was massive pressure coming from the University of Michigan to bring forward a heavy legal case against these protesters. So Rashida Tlaib was correct in her critique of the handling of these protests, and she was calling out that there seems to be some sort of a different standard when it comes to handling pro-Palestine protesters or people who are critical of the actions of the government of Israel versus if it happened to be a BLM protest or a climate protest. There has absolutely been a double standard here. But Jake Tapper and Dana Bash went on a days or weeks-long smear campaign insinuating that Rashida Tlaib is anti-Semitic for calling out the treatment of these pro-Palestine protesters. So this kind of lie, this kind of smear is allowed to take place on your network. And I mean, this was absolutely a racist smear against Rashida Tlaib, right? The idea is, well, she's Palestinian American, right? And so she must have only said this because she hates Jewish people. That's the very clear implication of what these anchors were saying. And they were completely wrong about it from the beginning. And, you know, the only way that you could figure that out, the only way that you could tell that they were lying about this from the beginning is that in the very article that they were quoting to say that Rashida was being anti-Semitic, you read down further in the article, the same thing, and you figure out exactly what Rashida Tlaib actually meant. They didn't even read the entire article, to the point where the guy who originally did the interview with Rashida Tlaib, where she was criticizing the Attorney General, that journalist had to go into the Twitter replies of Jake Tapper and Dana Bash to say, you guys are wrong about this. You guys are lying about what Rashida Tlaib said. And he did that day after day after day, repeatedly, and they continued to lie about Rashida Tlaib. So, you know, making some sort of a statement or a joke or a comment about Mehdi Hasan having a beeper, that will get you banned from CNN. But your own fucking anchors are smearing and lying about a Palestinian American congresswoman, and that's perfectly fine. That's normal on CNN. That's not the only example. I mean, you could look to the entire body of CNN's coverage of, you know, Israel's genocide in Gaza and see for yourselves. But this was another example here where we had Dana Bash, and I covered this on the channel at the time back in May. She did an entire monologue where she was smearing anti-genocide protesters on college campuses as being Nazis. She made a comparison here on her own Twitter account, harkening back to the 1930s in Europe. She's saying these college students who are upset that our government is sending the bombs to a country that is dropping them on the heads of thousands of innocent children, she's saying those students are basically the brown shirts from Nazi Germany in the 1930s. So again, this kind of racism, this kind of, let's look at the rhetoric here that was used in the CNN statement, right? I mean, this kind of incivility, right? This line to be crossed, it doesn't matter when it's your own anchors, right? It doesn't matter when it's Jake Tapper, when it's Dana Bash, but it does matter when it's Ryan Girdusky. Now, don't get me wrong. What Ryan said was disgusting, right? Obviously, it was disgusting, and I'm not surprised in the slightest that he would get banned from CNN, but it's not as if this kind of rhetoric has not been normalized on CNN. I don't know what you guys were expecting from having somebody on like Ryan Girdusky, given his past history of statements, but you should also maybe check with your own, primetime anchors and maybe see if there's something to look at there as well.
Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying